Hello malt mates, I'm Ralphie and welcome to The Whisky Bothy, which is a remote and rural located little whisky oasis. That's what it is. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And this is where I do my whisky reviews, which I've been doing for such a long time. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining me as I continue my series with review number 1107. And in this review, I'm reviewing, because we're coming to the end of the year 2025, I'm reviewing a very familiar brand that's very instantly recognised anywhere around the world as a Scotch whisky. It's a blended Scotch whisky, but not a traditional blended Scotch whisky. It is in fact a malt blend, or a blended malt. But in this occasion, it's a pure malt. Now you must be asking, why is that? Why does this say on the label, pure malt? Because in the old days, they did that before they decided to change the definition, malt mates, from pure malt to blended malt, because the wonderful folk in the Scotch whisky industry thought that people would confuse pure malt with single malt. So they brought in the definition of blended, or a combination of malt whiskies. Rather than malt blend, they decided to call it blended malt. But then people started to get confused with blended Scotch, because a blended Scotch can be a blended malt, particularly if the grain whisky is made in a pot still. Are you still with me? Let's get stuck into this review. I'm going to pour a glass of this. I bought this at auction. Several years ago. I saw it at an accessible price because nobody was particularly interested in it. And so I bought it. And this is a green label from back in 1997, 98, 99. Not long after the green label was introduced to the Johnnie Walker series, which primarily consists of Red Label, which is the cheapest basic mixing whisky, which is perfectly competent. The Black Label, which I think has gone seriously downhill in recent years. Then there's the Gold Label, which is the 18-year-old, sometimes it's not. And then you get the ubiquitous and designer Blue Label, which in my opinion is not worth the money. There are other Johnnie Walkers, Swing for example, and Swing Superior, both overlooked, both underrated, well worth looking out for at auction. Those are in fact, in my opinion, really good blended Scotches. Not blended malt, but blended Scotches. So a combination of single malt whisky and column still grain whisky. This is 100% malt whisky. It's a combination from a number of distilleries, and when they first introduced this label, they wanted to kind of really push forward that this was for the sippers rather than the mixers. So it was showcasing the skills of the blender plus the finest of the range of single malt whisky distilleries. And I have to say, when I bought my first bottle, I was very impressed. But there again, that was back in the late 90s when it was at its best. Recently, when I was last in Edinburgh, which was this year, I met a friend from way back in the day, as you do. And we went to a hotel for an afternoon tea. And he said, I must get you a whisky. And I thought, no, don't worry about it. And he said, no, I insist, because you've really helped me with my whisky journey. So I'm looking at the bar and I'm looking at the usual suspects in terms of single malts, Macallan, Glenfiddich, Talisker, Laphroaig, and I'm thinking, no. They had a Johnnie Walker green label, and this is the latest version. You see, it's got a white stripe under the diagonal label. So it's got a white stripe there with the age statement on it. So I had a glass of that, and I was terribly disappointed. The quality of the casks was just not good. And by the way, this is an independent whisky review channel. I buy what I review. So I have a certain leeway as to actually telling you what I really, really think about it. And there you have it. Just to forewarn you. You see, I've tasted green labels over the years, and I distinctly remember them being better. So if you're going to buy any green label, or black label or red label, it might be an idea to explore the options available to you for buying them at auctions or on the secondary market, because some retailers are now selling old whiskies along with new bottlings in their shop. You've just got to be sure you're buying legitimate stuff and not fakes, because in the collectible side of whisky, fakes are an issue. But be reassured, and I'm not going to wander too far off script here, but I need to say this, I need to let you know and keep you informed. Generally, it's the expensive high-end whiskies like Macallan, Ardbeg and Laphroaig that tend to get convincingly faked. But just buyer beware, buyer take care. And I recommend you stick to a reputable, probably online, online whisky auction house. Now, there's quite a few options in Britain, in the British Isles. Not so many options in the USA, but they are beginning to appear. And if you can't see a specialist whisky auction, look out for a general auction, particularly estate sales, because you'd be surprised at how many people have just had old bottles unopened sitting in the drinks cabinet for generations because nobody was interested in it. And you've got yesteryear's whiskies at sensible prices, and the quality can be amazing, absolutely amazing, so long as the neck fill's high and it's authentic. And I'll tell you why. Because in the old days they used simpler grain varieties, they used better quality casks, and generally any whisky that survived was the whisky that people thought was worth surviving. In other words, the better stuff, and not the rot gut. Anyway, what do we think of this? Pure malt, a very early bottling of Green Label, 15 years old. So every whisky in this blend of malts has a minimum age of 15 years in the cask. Well, as soon as I put my nose to it, I get this phenomenal smell of articulate, crisp, fresh, best quality casks. The sherry casks like you struggle to find today. This is a generation where the sherry casks actually matured sherry in them, and the producers were more inclined not to focus on Oloroso or PX to cater for the sweet tooth of the modern whisky drinker, but to actually mix together Oloroso, Fino, Amontillado and Palo Cortado casks. They mixed them all up just because they were all sherry casks. You don't hear so much about this. You might also see this at auction, right, if you're looking at auction, as described as Molto Puro. That's Italian for pure malt. Because back in the day, one of the most energetic markets for good quality whiskies was Italy, because Italians generally, as is their tradition, are brought up on healthy, flavoursome fresh food, and therefore at a very early age develop a sensible, mature palate which appreciates better quality stuff. It's as simple as that. But in this instance, I've only recently opened this bottle. By the way, the cork is in excellent condition. There's an idea now that all corks deteriorate over time automatically. This isn't the case. A lot of it's to do with the quality of the seal and how much air ingress you get. So if that's restricted, the cork is more likely to remain intact. And another reason is the actual core quality of the cork itself. Many modern bottlings, the cork's just too soft because it's been made for economy, not for quality. This is a different age. This is last century. And I know it's only 25, 26, 27 years ago. But so much has changed in Scotch whisky and so much has changed with Johnnie Walker range. So much has changed with the producer Diageo. Because between then and now, they paid off an awful lot of their time-served coopers and industrialised and mechanised their cask assembly process. And in my opinion, it's not done the brand any favours whatsoever and is in fact a seriously alarming false economy. Let's get back to this whisky now. I'm going to focus on this. By the way, if you come back in review number 1107 extras, I'm actually going to be comparing and contrasting this old generation of Green Label with a more recent generation of Green Label. This is about 6 years old, and in my opinion, the last of the good versions. We'll come to that later. Taste and smell. This is bottled at 43%. Where does it say it? It doesn't say it. It should say it. Where's my steampunker? My trusty magnifying glass. It really helps. Can't see a thing. I cannot see a single thing on this. I'm just going to say 43% because that's what I remember. I can't even read that label anymore. It's so dull. Right, so 43%. No ways at 46%. Diageo just wouldn't do that. It's not their style. I've got to spend time in the nose here, folks, because it's just a blast from the past. When quality really sparkled. Back in the day when we took it for granted, which we don't do now. Taste. A beautifully, almost fragrant and floral, crisp, European oak arrival, tinged with old sherry. There's a dry wood note in it. But the wood brings this immediate complexity to the experience. It is delicious. But don't think for 1 minute you can go into a whisky shop today or go onto Amazon today and buy this whisky. Because you can't. You can buy the label, you can buy the brand, but I'm just telling you because you need to know. You cannot buy this actual quality of whisky because it's not there anymore. If you want this quality of whisky, if you want a seriously sippable Johnnie Walker, you've got to go to auction and make sure you don't overpay. I'm going to add a drop of water to this, but in fact, I'm not even going to use my spoon. I'm going to do this rare thing and use my little fine plastic dropper. 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drops, 4 drop, 5, 6 drops. That's all I'm adding to this. I'm not adding any more because what happens when you blend malts together, they become brittle and fragile. A single malt's a tough cookie. You can add a relatively large amount of water, particularly at higher strength, and it will bring the strength down whilst retaining the complexity of smell and taste that is held in the higher alcohol concentration. But now I've lowered the alcohol concentration with this slightly, and what it does is it chases off the flavours. This is why when I get questions now and again, and one of the questions I get often repeated is, hey Ralphie, If higher alcoholic strength holds more flavour, why are you diluting it so it means there's less flavour? Why are you doing that? And the answer simple is, I'm doing it because that flavour just doesn't disappear instantly. It needs an hour to remove itself, to dissipate into the atmosphere, to create that beautiful smell above the glass. And whilst it's doing that, it opens up, it becomes more complex, it becomes more characterful, more meaningful, more eventful, more spectacular. And that's what I'm invested in, because I have the knowledge. And you should too, which is why you're watching my channel. Thanks. A wee roll around the glass to kind of chase off the odours a little. I've added water. What does it make a difference? It softens, it arounds, it sweetens the nose slightly, but that fresh, crisp, delicious, delightful note of combined single malts is still there. I can pick out the Caol Ila. It's one of the easiest to spot. I can also spot Glenelgyn with its lovely maltiness, its old school style, which is so hard to find in contemporary Diageo bottlings, primarily because of their cask policy and the fact that they're a multinational company which is too big to fail but too big to succeed as well. Just look at the share price. If I was to give one piece of advice to any big company now, it's whatever you do, don't float in the stock market, because you'll get big moneyed interests. Some of them hedge funds and others will be banks, and they'll come in and they'll pass themselves off as businessmen while behaving like politicians. And it's never for the benefit of your business. You want to keep yourself completely private like Bacardi, who still make good Scotch whisky considering the size of the company. This is really starting to sparkle now. It's really starting to shine. Do you know, this needs time. See, 15 years in the glass, 15 years in the cask, needs 15 minutes in the glass before you're going anywhere. Those who rush a whisky get half the experience or less. So you've got to be taking your time about it. That's why I don't shoehorn these reviews into 10 minutes or less. There's just no point. Crisp, dry, gingery. We're getting some floral notes, some creamy, almost biscuity notes from the Glenkinchie, which is now coming through, the softer, quieter lowland style of whisky, which separates the big hitters, the Cragganmores, the Caol Ilas, the very dependable Caol Ila. I have to say, very nicely composed. This is a very well blended whisky. In fact, 10 out of 10 for the calibre of the blend. In 1998, back in the 1990s. I'm not adding any more whisky, it doesn't need it. It is chill filtered, right? So it's less of an experience than it could be. It has got caramel E150 industrial chemical colorant added, as many contemporary blends do, but the majority of people who buy these whiskies do not care, because they're consuming the brand and they'll know a bit about whisky. They expect a little bit of a taste that makes them go, ew, right, and then they enjoy it, and then they pour another glass and make sure they have plenty of ice in it, or soda, or Coca-Cola. Fine, whatever. But for those who really want to get the best out of a Scotch whisky, there's two things you need to add: a drop of fresh water and a good dollop of thyme. And you've got to take your time and take it slow to discover, really discover, why Scotch whisky truly got its world-class reputation in the first place, which some distilleries now still hold on to, whilst others are letting slip. One final taste before the malt marks, because it is a malt, it's a blended malt, so it does get a malt mark. The arrival lengthens. There's a background sweetness, superbly old school and wonderfully well balanced. It's a gentle white peppery note in the development. A hint, a mere suggested hint of peppermint, of camphor, of sage, of something slightly herbaceous. And always an added extra in these old school bottlings is the confidence of the umami notes of well prepared casks that have been properly allowed to rest before they were refilled with spirit. And this is so important, because one reason you get the carbolic, sooty, burnt note in some modern whiskies, apart from the spirit industrial caramel, is because they're filling casks far too rapidly. They're not letting them rest and settle before they fill them. Some of the old skills are really getting lost these days. I notice it. But there again, they're there to be rediscovered, redefined, and they're needed to help restore Scotch whisky's reputation. What am I going to give this? I'm going to give this a very respectable, because this is a hugely nostalgic whisky for me. Back in the 90s, I was drinking quite a lot of whisky actually. So this takes me back to those days, and it was a different world. The internet really didn't exist much, although a few people were sending emails. But there was no YouTube. There was no Instagram. There was no Facebook. There was certainly no TikTok. And even the television actually had some decent programmes back in the day. 83 out of 100. There you have it. That's my review. Take it or leave it. The review is yours to enjoy. If you've enjoyed this and you've not yet subscribed and you've made it to this part of the video, well, why not just subscribe? And when you do, press the bell at the top so as that you get regularly updated as to when I do a new video, which is every single week, whether you like it or not. Thanks for watching. Come back to my next review, The Extras, and I shall compare and contrast two Johnnie Walker green labels. See you there.